Welcome back to Grit Gym, guys. We have Nick Tumminello here. He's an educator. He's a personal trainer. He's a strength coach. He's wearing the Sornex shirt today, the mustache. He's a thinker and an analyzer, and I really respect his opinion about a lot of things. I think you guys are really in for a treat here, especially because Nick comes from a different angle, breaking down a lot of the dogma that's in the fitness, strength conditioning industry, and I'm kind of surprised. I'm super thankful that you agreed to do this with me, Nick. I really appreciate it. One of the things I really wanted to I saw you speak in Kansas City, and the way that you talk about partial reps is a very good way to communicate it. And I've never found a good way to say it until you said that down there. And it's just one of the most interesting things in the fitness industry that people, they love board presses, they love rack pulls, they love chains, bands, any kind of accommodated resistance, and then they hate anybody that only goes to a half squat or does a low box step up or these kind of not typical full range of motion things. Can you kind of expand on your thought process behind that, and for the kind of the more lay person?
Well, first off, I thank you for your compliments, and I also just want to, and I say this to anybody I do podcast interviews with, but I hope that the people listening to this recognize and give credit for the platform that you're providing somebody like me. Yeah, I'm grateful. You said thank you to me. Well, they need to thank you every time and be grateful, because you're doing this out of your own time, and they're getting this resource for free, but it doesn't come free for you. You put a lot of time and effort into putting these things together, to schedule this, to get the resources to set this up. And I say that because people tend to, because there's so much more information available, that we tend to forget that even though we didn't pay for it, somebody paid to bring it to us. And,
Sure.
So everything that I'm sharing is from thousands of hours and from thousands of dollars spent, and lots of blood, sweat, and tears, refining and things. And we tend to forget that. We're just handed stuff. So anyway, I just want to make sure that people know that, because it's really easy to kind of perpetuate a sense of entitlement with all the podcasts and all the social media, and understand that, you've paid for this, and they need to be grateful for that. Okay. Now, so I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right.
What's your thoughts on, I should have let you open up, but what's your thoughts on partial reps? The dogma behind it, the romanticism, the full range. In a nutshell, why do you do partial reps? Why do you think that partial reps are a good thing?
Okay, well, what you brought up first, let me piggyback off of what you just said. What you said is that if you do rack pulls, which is pulling basically a partial range of motion Romanian deadlift, everybody thinks, oh, well, that's part of a good comprehensive, strength training, i.e. powerlifting type program. But if you do partial squats, people think you don't know what the heck you're doing, right? Now, minus, again, if you have knee issues or something like that. But if you think one is valuable, then you have to think the other one is valuable at some level. And we have some research to demonstrate that. So what I talked about at the conference that you were at live, I use back rows as a specific example, and I'm not going to sit here and do the whole lecture, but basically it comes down to this, that because there's two factors in every lift in resistance training. You have what I would call the resistance curve. Now, people that are really into biomechanics, they start using terms like internal torque versus external, whatever. Just let's keep it simple. Right. Yeah. You have the resistance curve, which is how the load is being applied to you, and you have your internal or your strength curve, which is how you're applying force to overcome the load or back at the load. Now, those things change based on ranges of motion. So it's lever arm, right? If I hold a weight way out here, I have less of a mechanical advantage than if I hold the weight in here. So 1 pound may be 1 pound. But 1 pound, what's happening here may be 10 pounds relative to the distance of the mechanical disadvantage I have, but it may feel it's going to be a lot lighter if I bring it in closer. Even though it always stayed the same weight in my hand, it didn't exert the same force across my joint. That is what I mean by a resistance curve. Also, depending on what positions you are in the ranges of motion, your muscles are in better positions to exert maximal force and to not exert maximal force. When muscles are fully contracted, they're actually a little bit weaker than when they're in their mid-range or when they're lengthened. Because when they're lengthened, they have a little bit of that elasticity, which helps them generate force, right? It's kind of like a rubber band effect. So partial reps can take advantage of increasing your full range of motion strength. When I say range of motion, I don't mean from a flexibility of a joint or availability of a joint. I mean within a given exercise. So if we can use a pressing, for example, which is why bands work well, I have a little mechanical advantage. Or let's do here so you can see it better. I have less of a mechanical advantage here and much more of a mechanical advantage there. So it makes sense to use bands here, because if the band's pulling me down that way, as the band is getting heavier as it's being pulled and stretched, I'm getting stronger because I'm gaining a mechanical advantage on the weight. That's what you call accommodating resistance. Problem is, it doesn't work well when you do rows, because as you do a pull, I'm going from an area where I have a mechanical advantage to a longer lever arm, and I'm reducing the mechanical advantage. So in that case, it makes more sense sometimes to change, well, in both cases, whether you have bands or whatever, sometimes it makes sense to break up an exercise into points of emphasis within a range of motion and use a weight that is appropriate for that given range of motion. So for example, I'd say I can use bands to do squats, bands around the barbell. And as the bands are getting tighter, I'm getting stronger as my legs are straightening out. But let's say I don't have bands, or let's say my bands have been sitting in my car, or let's say one's older than the other. There's a lot of issues with bands. You can't really measure bands because they change.
Right.
So, yeah.
Dangerous.
All right. Yeah, exactly right. So let's say I need to get a measurement on that. Okay, well, if I say a 5RM squat, 5RM squat, ass to grass, let's say I'm capable, is only a 5RM squat when my thigh is parallel to the ground, thighs, because that's when the lever arm is the longest. When I start to stand up, it's no longer a 5RM squat because I'm gaining mechanical advantage. So if you gave me partial squats, I would have to go higher load on the bar to get 5RM. So now, did I really increase your 5RM strength through that full range of motion, or did I just increase your 5RM squat strength in the area that you're limited in regards to the mechanical disadvantage? So there's a reason to do partial reps if you're trying to get that same level of strength across the range of motion. So what it comes down to is that training through a full range of motion can be done by using partial reps and emphasizing different parts of the range, because different parts of the range have different strength curves and different resistance curves that need to be accommodated for. And also, last thing I'll say is everything we just talked about, none of this stuff is my opinion. None of this stuff is very negotiable. And I don't give a shit what any other coaches say. Physics beats up your guru, beats up this guy, beats up you, and beats up everybody else. And physics will never go out of date. And what we're just talking about is physics. And principle of adaptation, principle of specificity. Force across tissue, physics, principle of adaptation is what happens to the tissues. They adapt to however you load them.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I really like about all this stuff is levers and engineering and physics, right? So when it really comes down to it, it's like you're gonna have a tough time arguing against gravity, and that's what we're really talking about here is how do we overcome gravity? So it's a really interesting thing that people will still try to hammer on this and not accept it. But so what are some, to put it for a chin up, for instance, just to lay it out, what I think you're saying is that the first half of the chin up is much easier than the second half of the chin up. And so it would make sense to only do the first half of the chin up to get stronger at doing chin ups.
Well, no, I didn't say that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that if you're trying to maximize your chin up performance, which would mean your strength, force output, or strength endurance, whatever it is to understand that there's different points of that chin up where you're going to have disadvantages, which is normally going to be right there. That's when the lever arm is the longest. Here you have a nice stretch. You can use some elastic properties, which is why after you can't do more chin ups, you can still do some partials. But most people get lost right here. That's why they got to do that knee kick, right, to get past this. And then you start getting close to the bar again. So what I would say is this is your weakest point. So if I'm going to do what I might start with somebody is find a weight that is a 5 RM for them that's basically a full range, but that's actually limited to here. But there's nothing wrong with me doing some partial ranges down at the bottom for 5 RM, which would be way heavier, because I'm actually going to get stronger through the full range, because I'm not actually, if I'm doing 5 RM chin-ups, it's limited to where the lever arm is the longest. It's no longer 5 RM here anymore. So I'm not fully maximizing the strength through the full range of that movement like I think I am. I'm limited to wherever part of the movement the lever arm is the longest.
Yeah, I really need to step on my communication, don't I?
Yeah.
I'm glad you cleared that up, because that's what I was trying to say. What's that?
Put it this way. Let's say I'm doing full range chin-ups, but I said that you're limited to where the lever arm is the longest. It's here. Let's say it's a 5 RM. Well, I'm not actually getting 5 RM strength here. The weight that I'm using that is limited to here may give me 12 RM strength in this part of the range of motion. The only way to get 5 RM strength in that part of the range of motion, where I have a better mechanical advantage and a little stretch, is to up the load. But if I up the load, it's too heavy for me to get here anymore. That's what I'm saying. But I'm still increasing my strength through the range using partial ranges. But I'm not saying only do partial ranges.
Oh yeah, of course not. Of course not. Of course not. What are some other so we went through chin-ups, we went through rack pulls. What are some other common exercises that people don't really think of as partial reps? They're almost like a sled push would be on some level a partial rep. You could almost call a box squat or a box box jump a partial.
You're not going. You're not getting to the full hip extension, and you're certainly not going into full hip flexion when you do sleds.
Yeah, but like, what are some other? I'm just sitting around thinking, or I'm just thinking here, like, what are some other really common ones that people they almost take for granted, like a sled push. Nobody really thinks of it as a partial rep, and everybody loves it, but it's still a partial rep.
Most exercises. Listen, man, unless you're on a cam machine, a selectorized machine with the bean shaped thing, most exercises are really if it's what I would call single force vector loaded. So if it's a cable, like a cable, row or a cable triceps or overhead triceps or face pull, the cable is the force vector. That's where you're working against. If it's a free weight, meaning dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells, if you take away momentum, so take away kettlebell swings, because that kettlebell's got a main force it's trying to pull away from you. That's a little different. But if you're using, the basic form, basic muscle building, where you're trying to minimize momentum, well, then the force vector is gravity. Well, because it's a single force vector, there's times at which the lever arm is shorter and the lever arm is longer, which is 90 degrees to the force vector, and when this lever arm is shorter again. So because of that, it's never going to be truly full range strength, even though you're moving through a full range of motion, because there's times in the load. Now, to answer your question, one that people don't think about is bench presses or dumbbell presses. I'm not loading my pecs at all at the top, because the weight is going right through my shoulder. But my pecs are horizontal adductors, adduction. They do this to me, but I'm not strengthening them anymore through this range doing a dumbbell press. I'm strengthening them through here to here. Once my wrist gets above my shoulder, I'm no longer loading that across that tissue anymore in horizontal adduction. That's where flies come in. So almost every free weight and every cable exercise, at some level, from a loading perspective, is partial range of motions. This is the thing. People think, you're moving through it, so you move through a full range. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. It's how the load is being applied across the tissues, right? So that's the thing. I don't care where you're moving. It depends on where's the weight relative to, the joint and all those things, because sometimes you're not loading it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, like how much of this is, obviously 100% of it's subjective to the person, but at the same time, like if you took someone through what would be stereotypical RDL all the way to the floor and all the way back up again versus just taking them down to their range, like how much does full range of motion become a subjective thing based on the individual?
Well, again, we have to clarify something that it's very important to delineate full range of motion within a given exercise movement and full joint range of motion, because we're not going through full lumbar, flexion and full lumbar extension that's available to the joint, especially because those joints have additional passive range of motion if someone went over and pushed us, right? We're not training,
Sure.
We're not loading through those. We're talking about range of motion relative to a given exercise. That's very important to understand or to delineate. Now, with that delineation made, again, it's not about, I'm still going to take you in a range that I think you can control. I'm going to watch that arch in your back because we're trying to put most of the force through the hip joint while we stabilize at the lumbar spine. And obviously that goes into the hamstrings as well if we're talking about a Romanian deadlift. But understand at the top of that movement, there's hardly any load across the tissues that I was loading at the bottom before the plates are before, of course. So I'm not loading through all through hip extension, even though it's a hip extension exercise. I'm really only loading when my hips are bent about here to about there. Once I'm up tall and I still have about another 10 to 15 degrees of hip extension, RDLs don't do shit for that.
Yeah, no, that's you did it right. You went right where I was hoping you would go with that. No,
that's what I'm saying. You're moving through it. Doesn't mean you're loading through the range of motion that you're moving through. That's the biggest myth in training. Moving through a full range of a given exercise means training through that, or means strengthening through that full range of motion that you move through. Not true.
Yeah, no, that's you'd have to really justify that one out. Anyway, what about how do Olympic lifts fit in here? Your views on those? You can go nuts with that one.
Well, I think Olympic lifts are for Olympic lifters.
That's how I say it too. And with the stereotypical RDL versus a clean, I mean, is that a good example of once a person gets to a certain level, the bar flies, momentum's carrying that bar up. They're no longer hitting. There's no really any strength curve going on there until they catch it anywhere in their body.
Well, I mean, now that's a way more complex discussion because the idea of an Olympic lift is to generate maximal force at a quick point to allow the bar to fly. So it's a very different goal, and the technique is to allow that rhythm where you explode and then relax to let the bar carry and then reset underneath the bar or whatever lift that you're going to do. So the reason why I said I think Olympic lifts are for Olympic lifters is I mean spending all that time into the technique when you could be doing other things or simpler Olympic lifting variations such as a high pull or a jump shrug or just jump.
That was my next.
Right. The only people I think need to spend time on the technical aspects of becoming really good at something that is truly a skill. When we could go right on to creating a training effect are the people who need to learn the skill. And listen, you don't see me doing a lot of kettlebell work with people beyond swings. And I've even cut back more on swings. I think it's a little tough on people's low backs. And I've had a lot of people have back issues from kettlebell swings. And the research has started to show that there's a tremendous. So we got people who don't want to do crunches because they say it's bad on your back. Yet you do kettlebell swings up and down until people go in the face of them. And yet kettlebell swings have been shown to create way more spinal compression than crunches do, right? So that blows that argument out of the water. Now maybe they have other arguments for not doing crunches, but it certainly shouldn't be the compression issue. If you're using kettlebell, then you're contradicting yourself. Oh, yeah.
If you just look at the kettlebell swing, it doesn't even seem if you think through it logically, you're decelerating on a crazy level when you throw that bell back between your legs. If you can't load that through your hips and your hamstrings, how are you going to slow that thing down? You're back, So I completely.
Yeah. So but I don't want to get into that whole thing. The reason why I just brought it up is that for most people, if you can do RDLs and you can do jumps, we can teach you a kettlebell swing pretty quick. But all the other kettlebell exercises, cleans, snatches, man, like I don't even bother with those because I'm not going to spend time teaching you how to do an exercise just for the sake of doing it. When you don't need, there's no special benefit to that. If I'm just trying to load your shoulders or load your traps or whatever, why do I need to spend time getting you a master at kettlebells? Unless you're trying to compete in kettlebell sport. And I don't train Olympic lifters and I don't train people for kettlebell sport.
Yeah, me either. We actually have a 60-second rule at Grit. That's if you can't teach it and they can't learn it in under 60 seconds, we're on the wrong exercise. And I get a little crap for that. But it's like if you're teaching a front squat and they can't get it in under 60 seconds, we got to go to a goblet squat. We're on the wrong exercise. We got to go to something else. Like we're on the wrong exercise.
Yeah, and I think people take you. I understand when you say under 60 seconds, you're not sitting there. I think it's highly unlikely that you're actually sitting there with a time clock and going, boop, 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 it's over. What you're really just saying is, look, if you're spending a lot of time on something, you're trying to do the square peg round hole thing, move on. You're just putting a kind of a cool little, spin on it to get people to understand, hey, look, just don't sit there and dwell on things, because I'm sure, well, 60 seconds is not enough to even coach something. It's like, I don't mean it that way, but that's
I don't mean it super literal, but to a certain extent. But like, if you really did stop, and I bet you if you started timing yourself for how long you were teaching a certain exercise, I bet you get most of them done in under 30 seconds. I bet you it's a much shorter time period than you think. What's that?
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Even like a Turkish get up, I'm like, if it takes you more than 60 seconds to get through the entire thing, well, maybe we just need to do half of it. I mean,
yeah,
it's too much.
Yeah.
Oh,
listen, man. Let me just think what you just said. I call the two A's: awareness versus ability. Do you have the lack of awareness of what I want you to do, but you have the ability? Then we can see if you're starting to pick it up. But if I make you aware and you still show that you have the lack of ability, then we move on. And so, if the coaching, and I try different ways of coaching, then we realize, hey, it's probably this is not the best fit for you. So that's my little criteria. Now, again, how long that takes? Well, sometimes I put it on myself and say, well, maybe I didn't communicate it to you in a way that resonates with you. But there's a certain point you realize, hey, I tried to come this way, I tried to come this way, I tried to come this way with coaching, and none of those were even getting us in the, remotely close. Well, your issue is a lack of ability issue, and we need to create a training effect now. And there's plenty of other ways to put force across tissue. Again, no exercise is magic. I'm going to move on to find a different way that benefits you to put force across tissue. The reason why I said that no exercise is magic is because we get all the corrective exercise people going, well, you first have to fix their dysfunction, blah, blah, blah. Problem is, none of those things have ever been shown to be real dysfunctions other than just variations of normal. So when people are trying to say, oh, well, you don't move well because you can't do this exercise, no one's been able to demonstrate that being able to do this movement pattern or that movement pattern in this scoring system or based on that criteria is highly reliable at reducing injury or improving performance. And if they don't help you and do one or the other, then who gives a crap, right? If I'm looking for a baseline, great. I'm going to base that baseline off of your goals and your ability, and then we can see that's my baseline. You know what I mean? So I don't need some arbitrary thing. I can make it specific to you. That's called personal training.
Yeah. I like that. I might have to go back and steal that portion out of this video. But so one of the last things that I really wanted to hit on this topic is like how to interview your trainer or coach. Like how should the lay person, the person who isn't a personal trainer, isn't a strength coach, how should they go about finding a person who's qualified, a person who is going to be good for them? Because I've run into master's degrees, doctors of exercise, all these like crazy high level educators that are, I don't know, like one lady argued with me that internal rotation of the shoulder and protraction of the shoulder were the same things. And I was like, no, they're not the same things. They're two different things. Anyway, she had a master's degree in kinesiology. So, like, how should people go about interviewing their coach? What are some questions that they should ask them?
I would say it really comes down to, you kind of already answered your own question when you said, how do they find a trainer for them? So I would say you ask questions like, have you ever trained anybody like me before? Now, I understand if you're a new trainer, then it's kind of one of those, double-edged things. Well, we're looking for someone experienced. Well, how do I get experience if nobody hires me? All right, I understand you have to start somewhere, but these are just questions to start off with. Have you ever worked with anybody like that? No. Well, how would you program for my goals versus, differently? How are they different? Because trainers, a lot of times they kind of have their workout flavor of the day kind of thing. Now, if you're in group training, it's what it's all based on, and maybe you want that. Right. But if you're a personal trainer, what you're saying is, hey, that group stuff is not for me. I want something more targeted. All right. So if you had a personal trainer, you're already self-selected to want something more designed for you, and not just a shotgun approach that everybody else and their dog is doing on that day. Workout of the day, flavor of the day kind of thing. So you would say, how would you, how is this different than other workouts? How it would be different? And then you can also ask is, do you have any testimonials? And a lot of times they don't. Look, I've trained a ton of people. I don't have that many testimonials up on my website. It's just not something I've spent time doing. But I can tell you what, no problem giving you a phone number of clients across the board, so I can still demonstrate. They ask them if they had it. Do you have any past clients, any current clients that I could contact that I can ask a little bit about and talk to from them? I think that's a great question, especially somebody, if they say, yes, I've trained people like you. All right. Mind chatting with me?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then favorite lifting myths besides the partial rep stuff. Like I've got a few written down here, like muscle confusion, reps of failure, reps and sets of failure, just like just going to max load every workout, no bilateral exercises. What are some other ones? That the spine wants to be free and happy to move around. What are some of your favorite myths in the exercise world?
Well, I understand where all these come from, and I don't really have a lot of problem with any of the things that you just said, because I understand those are coming from magazine people who are trying to speak with general population in a language that they can resonate with. All right?
Okay.
So us trainers, we get too caught up in these terms, and it's like, yeah, but if we all want to get people to buy in, that's the first. Get buy-in, and some people don't speak our language, and you have to go to them. So, if I understand, but it's okay to do that at first, and then if you can clarify later, once you build a relationship, okay, well, we said this, but look, that's a little bit oversimplified. So let's unpack that a little bit, and then you go into that. But sometimes we get too caught up in that, we push people away. And I mean people who want to come to us. I'm not saying you have to go pull people off the couch, but I mean people who are already coming in, but they're looking for something to grab onto that helps them stay in. That's my thing. I'm not trying to get people off the couch. I'm not trying to be a cheerleader. What I'm trying to do is take people who are already willing to come through the door and get them to stay there, and get them to better understand how to work out more effectively with the time while they're there. That's my goal, right? I'm not, So if you're, I'm not trying to lead you to water, but if you're there, I'm going to help you, get the most out of it. That's my goal. All right. Now, that being said, things like muscle confusion. All right. I know that's what the infomercials say, but that's principle of variety. That's principle of variety. So, you know what I mean? It's not wrong. You know what I mean? That's based on a principle. It's just commercial terms for the same thing. So it's up to us to clarify that, so people don't buy into something they think is a magic formula, when it really is a basic principle of programming. We need to make it less magical sounding, and and more standard of how we program. I can't remember some of the other ones. Going heavy every day. Well, that's I think that depends on the individual and the goal. Maybe they enjoy that. I would say is, maybe you can get away with that if you're 20 years old. So yeah. I'm not saying I'd program it, but I don't know if that's that super. I don't know how much that kind of is permeating the fitness world. I certainly have not. I don't know too many general population people looking for fat loss and general fitness who are trying to PR every day. I don't know what you said.
I just threw a few out that get thrown out a lot. Like I personally think there's a time and a place for just about anything. Like you're looking at some kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, a metabolic circuit where you're trying to get the heart rate to go up. Well, like you could call that a muscle confusion type thing. But like in a powerlifting scenario, are you going to do a different exercise every single time you walk into the gym? Probably not. So you basically walked right into it. Like you took off with it just the way you said some unique things I wasn't expecting, but I like that a lot.
Listen, man, it depends. It depends on your goal. It depends on your goal. Their variety is fantastic. I'm interested, and also if they're looking at humans as physical, they're not trying to be a master. They're trying to be well versed. So I would be in order there. If you're trying to be in order there, if you're trying to do this, then less variety would be. It depends on why are you actually?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, it's about that time. Any other tell them where can they find you? Where can they follow you?
Well, the easiest place to follow me is nicktumminello.com or nicktumminello.com. That's the letter U. Herman's the letter U. That's the letter U. Herman's the letter U. Social media channels, Facebook. Facebook.
They're all the same.
Yep.
Cool. And the book that's going to drop here pretty soon. You want to tell people a little bit about that?
So I have 2 books already. They're both and other booksellers shelves. Fat loss. Second loss. Building muscle and performance. The third one that will be out in spring 2008. It's called Your Workout Perfected.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Well, I really appreciate you being here, taking time out of your day. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
I appreciate you having me, man. Thanks for what you do.
All right. Well, we're going to be off. Thanks for being here, all the Grid Gym people, and we'll see you tomorrow.